Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening on the Integrity Systems Company Stand By What You Sell webinar, especially for Tasmania. I'm Deanna Lush from Ag Communicators, and I'll be helping out with facilitation on tonight's session. So tonight is all about helping you to understand the elements of Australia's red meat integrity system and providing you with practical tips so you can stand by what you sell. The webinar is hosted by Integrity Systems Company with support nationally from the peak industry councils, so Sheep Producers Australia, Cattle Council of Australia and the Goat Industry Council of Australia. And in Tasmania this evening, we are supported by the Tasmanian Government through the Department of Primary Industries, Parks, Water and Environment, better known as DPIPWE, as well as State Farming Organisation, the Tasmanian Farmers and Graziers Association. So a few housekeeping items before we proceed. We're running today's session as a webinar, so this does mean that your microphones are muted, but we want to be very interactive and so welcome any questions that you might have as we go through. We have the Q&A function enabled, so if Zoom isn't your platform or you haven't used it before, just move your cursor to the bottom of the screen and you'll see the Q&A button. Just click on that one and type your questions in there. So we'll answer them as we go through and at the end of each section. And then we'll have a general Q&A at the end of the webinar. Now, if we do have significant tech issue where we can't or you can't see or hear us anymore, we just close the meeting off and send you a new invite within 10 minutes of the closure and pick up where we left off. But to introduce who we have on this evening's session. So our presenter is Kathleen Allen, who is Communications and Evaluation Manager for Integrity Systems Company. She's responsible for the rollout of communication, stakeholder engagement and evaluation activities right across the organisation. From ISC, we also have Damon Holmes, who's the Integrity Program Manager. We also have George Basher, who's his Operations Analyst, and Joe Gangemi, who is Communications Officer. From DPIPWE, we have Andrea Nichols, and she will answer any of your queries where there's a state-based responsibility for that part of the integrity system. So this session will be recorded and we will circulate the link tomorrow along with some resources to help guide you in your use of integrity system programs. We also have a short evaluation link at the end of the presentation, just so we can get your feedback and understand if you find this way of receiving updates the most useful. So on that note, I will hand over to Kathleen to start the presentation.
Thanks, Deanna, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight and welcome. And it's really exciting joining you in Tasmania. We've got people from around the country in a couple of states actually, so the team from South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland. So it's great to join you and thanks again for being with us tonight. So the agenda tonight, I thought we'd just go through what is the role of the Integrity Systems Company and where do we fit in the broader red meat industry, touch on the importance of the red meat integrity system. Then we'll go through the integrity system programs, which you're probably familiar with, being the Livestock Production Assurance and the National Livestock Identification System. Then we'll talk a little bit about some changes to the National Vendor Declarations that have recently come online, introduce you to the faster and easier ENVD platform to help you with your NVDs, and then also some tips and tricks, but about in particular getting all your integrity accounts in one place using MyMLA. So to start off with, Integrity Systems Company, or ISC, is a fully owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, and where we fit within the broader industry structure is that ISC is what we refer to as a service provider to industry, or we are a program delivery organisation in particular. So MLA and ISC, we provide industry services, while the organisations listed there in the top row, they're actually focused on policy and strategy. So they're the organisations, we often refer to those as the peak industry councils, and they advocate on behalf of producers to decision makers. Now, policy and strategy and service provision are certainly separate roles, but all these organisations work together to support a profitable future red meat industry. So Meat and Livestock Australia is responsible for research, development, adoption and marketing for the red meat industry. We collaborate with the Australian government and the wider red meat industry, and we invest in initiatives that contribute to producer profitability, sustainability and global competitiveness. And we do that through investing the levies that red meat and livestock producers pay at the point of transaction or point of sale. So sheep and cattle levies are then invested, they're matched with Australian government dollars up to a certain point, and then Meat and Livestock Australia invests those dollars in research, development and adoption and marketing activities on behalf of producers under direction of those policy and advocacy strategy organisations that we just showed you a second ago. So Integrity Systems Company, where do we fit? Well, as I said, we're a fully owned subsidiary of Meat and Livestock Australia, and we manage and deliver Australia's red meat integrity system. And why do we do that? Because an effective integrity system is the foundation for consumer confidence in Australian red meat. Now, consumer confidence in food production in Australia is based on two key factors. And the first one of those is traceability of that product through the supply chain. And traceability equals accountability right back to the farm where the animal was raised. And then the second of those factors is production to an assessed standard. Now, as a first world country, we often take it for granted that our food is produced safely and ethically, but this is not necessarily the case in every country. And when you're selling food to international markets, and the majority of our red meat does go overseas, so for example, you may be interested to know that about 50% of all Australian sheep meat and over 95% of Australian mutton is actually exported. So we certainly rely on that market. And for us to do that, we need to make sure that we've got a transparent, rigorous production system that requires audited record keeping on farm, and these things are essential. And certainly international buyers require that these systems are in place. So what Integrity Systems Company does is we work collaboratively with government and industry to deliver that world-leading traceability and assurance program, and they are the National Livestock Identification System and Livestock Production Assurance. These programs are the foundations of Australia's red meat integrity system. So you can see here the red meat integrity system ensures that livestock that's produced in Australia is safe to eat and that it's fully traceable, and it certainly protects that reputation that we have earned over a long period of time. It provides a level of on-farm assurance, animal identification and traceability from paddock to plate, and it guarantees the integrity of Australia's red meat industry. And those programs also underpin our livestock selling system and ensure that buyers, retailers and consumers have confidence in Australian red meat. So why is the red meat integrity system really important to Australia? Well, it is crucially important because the Australian red meat industry now, and I think in times of COVID, for example, when the economy is under threat from a number of different sectors, I guess it's really important that we continue to protect the Australian red meat and the livestock industry. Currently, this industry is valued at over $28 billion. It has about 400,000 jobs. We've got 80,000 businesses across Australia involved in red meat production. And probably more importantly, and is quite surprising, is that Australian red meat goes into 100 markets overseas. So it's really important that when you're filling out your National Vendor Declaration, for example, that you're keeping that in the back of your mind all the time, that you might be a small producer or you might only be producing a small number of animals in a large market, but every single one of those animals contributes to this really exciting industry, and the reputation which we've gained over many years is something that we certainly need to protect. And we've all got our role to play within that industry. It's certainly a very large and important industry in the Australian economy. There are thousands of people who depend on it for their livelihoods and also their food security and protein requirements, and that's both here in Australia and overseas. We've got some examples there on the slides where there's been issues overseas that you're probably familiar with, such as mad cow disease, African swine fever, all those types of things which can very quickly and very easily undermine an entire industry. And it's those types of things that we need to protect. So these things just highlight why our red meat integrity system is so important, because it means that we can protect the industry. It also supports those premium prices and positive overseas perceptions of our products, and I think everybody would certainly recognise that Australian livestock prices are at record levels at the moment, and it certainly ensures Australia's reputation as a clean and green supplier of red meat. And whilst there certainly are multiple producers and many properties ranging in size, the integrity system really is about delivering one measure of quality on behalf of all Australian red meat through one integrity system. So the red meat integrity system, it's all connected. I've already mentioned that there are a couple of programs that make up that system. So many producers, and for that matter others in the supply chain, don't necessarily see the system as a whole. They might see individual programs such as LPA and the NLIS as individual or separate requirements. And then on top of that, of course, you've got each state and territory having their own requirements around property identification, livestock transfers and biosecurity. But then bringing all the components, both the ISC managed ones and then the state and territory managed ones, together into one system creates a national framework for the whole red meat industry, allowing red meat producers to stand by what they sell. And this little infographic here outlines the various elements of the system, and we'll refer to that during the webinar tonight. So as I've said, the LPA and the NLIS, joined together by the National Vendor Declaration, which we'll spend quite a bit of time focusing on, makes up that red meat integrity system. So the two programs work together. Now, realising that we've got varying levels of experience on the webinar tonight, so just a quick refresher, and we'll provide some more detail on the two programs as we work through them tonight. But basically, the Livestock Production Assurance Program is the tick of assurance for your product from producer to consumer. It's all about what you've done on farm, covering food safety, animal welfare and biosecurity, and it demonstrates the professionalism of our industry and underpins market access for Australian red meat. The NLIS, or the National Livestock Identification System, is all about identification and traceability. It tracks the location of every animal throughout its life. It's mandatory for producers and endorsed by major producer, feedlot, agent, sale yard and processor bodies. It's underpinned by state and territory legislation and enhances Australia's ability to track livestock during disease and food safety incidents as well. And the central component of both these programs are property identification codes, or PICs, and a PIC is required for registration with both LPA and NLIS. And because PICs are managed independently by the state and territory departments of agriculture, their incorporation into the system is the only way that traceability and food safety can therefore be managed at a national level. And for an industry that exports a very high proportion of its product overseas, the assurance of a strong and effective national system is really important, because of course overseas markets don't necessarily want to know what the state requirements are for Tasmania or Victoria or New South Wales. They just want to know that it's brand Australia. So here's a really quick summary coming up of what producers need to do on farm, or what it means for you on farm across those different programs. So for LPA, producers basically make a commitment to manage their livestock and their property to the 7 required standards of the program, and they include property risk assessments, safe and responsible animal treatments, stock foods, fodder crops, grain and pasture treatments, preparation for dispatch of livestock, livestock transactions and movements, biosecurity and animal welfare. These 7 areas are the focus of on-farm audits to ensure that the management systems used by livestock producers comply with LPA rules and standards. And for the National Livestock Identification System, in terms of what it means on farm, basically the NLIS combines 3 elements to enable lifetime traceability of animals. And that's, the first is that all livestock are identified by visual or electronic ear tag or device, that all physical locations are identified by means of a property identification code, and that all livestock location data and movements are recorded in a central database, and that's the NLIS database. And then, of course, the NLIS and the LPA programs both come together when animals move. And when animals move, they require documentation through the National Vendor Declaration. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the NVDs right now. So a review of all current NVD versions by SafeMeet in 2019 recommended that a number of changes to be made. Now, these reviews happen from time to time, and these resulted in the development of updated versions of the LPA NVDs. These changes collectively will provide an easier, more efficient and cost-effective system for producers and supply chain stakeholders and enable them to easily interact with the integrity system. And the suite of changes aligns with the industry goal of ensuring that the integrity system of the future is simpler to use, valued by industry and trusted by consumers. So the three main changes to the NVDs for 2020 are that there are new versions for all species, and they were released on the 1st of July. There was a new ENVD system released at the end of March, and then the EDEC is being decommissioned over the remainder of this year and will be no longer available from the 1st of January next year. So new versions of LPA NVDs for all species became available on the 1st of July, and they're identified by version number 0720. And hopefully you've seen over the last couple of weeks and probably even longer some communication around those changes. The current versions of NVDs, or the previous versions now, will continue to be accepted until the 31st of December this year. And then from the 1st of January in 2021, only the updated versions or versions 0720 of all NVDs will be accepted for all species. Now, important to note there that under the MLA's Accelerated Adoption Initiative, there is no cost for NVD books until the 1st of July 2021. And to order copies of the new LPA NVD books, you can simply visit the Integrity Systems Company website, call the ISC help desk or log in to the LPA Service Centre and you can order them online. So what's changed in the NVDs for version 0720? So just very quickly, a bit of a snapshot there for you. On the sheep NVD, we now have the inclusion of the number of electronic devices in the consignment. So that a number of you that produce cattle would be very familiar with that, having been present on the cattle NVD for a number of years. This basically is new for sheep and it caters for the mandatory use of electronic identification in Victoria and increasingly being used in a number of other states, particularly by seed stock producers. And one of the other things that's changed for the new NVDs is the inclusion of the destination pick. Now this is actually mandatory in Western Australia and Tasmania, but it's optional in the other states. However, certainly in the other states we are encouraging people to complete and to include the destination pick because it certainly helps when it comes to completing your NLIS transfers, but also enhances the lifetime traceability throughout the supply chain. And basically we've got a little integrity insight there for you. So how actually do you find the destination pick? To put it on your NVD, well, you can ask your agent or your buyer before you're loading your stock and completing your NVD. You can certainly search that in the NLIS database as well. And if you're using the ENVD, the search function in the ENVD is really quite sophisticated and quite easy to use. The other thing that's been changed on the new NVDs is removal of the agent's declaration section, which was Part C previously. So that's no longer there as well. And again, just to order your new NVDs, you can do that through the website, the LPA Service Centre, or call the help desk. The other thing that I mentioned very quickly is that the EDEC is being decommissioned over the remainder of 2020. So basically, you were able to purchase tokens only up until the 30th of April. Then if you still have tokens that you purchased previously, you can use those between the 30th of April and the 31st of December this year. And as of the 31st of December, access to all EDECs will cease. Now, the reason for this is so that we can run a single digital system, which will be both more efficient and certainly will be a cost and a time saving to industry. And the new ENVD certainly covers all the information the EDEC does and much more, but in a much more user-friendly way. So that's just a little bit there about the NVD changes. What I thought we might do now is, I guess, go into the next part of the webinar. So ISC is working quite closely with a number of industry influencers and producers right across Australia to, I guess, increase the awareness, the knowledge and the skills in meeting requirements under the Livestock Production Assurance and the National Livestock Identification Systems. And we really want to help industry to stand by what it sells. And so part of our strategy is to communicate practical tips on how producers can meet requirements of Australia's red meat integrity system. So basically, I thought we'd take you through a series of tips that might help you in meeting your requirements as part of the integrity system. And the first one that we can focus on is through the Livestock Production Assurance Program. And being part of Livestock Production Assurance means that producers need to keep your online LPA account details up to date, maintain your LPA accreditation, so this means includes doing the online learning and the assessment to understand LPA's requirements for livestock and property management, and renewing your accreditation every 3 years. So accreditation gives you more options for marketing your livestock. It means that you can access the LPA NVDs for all livestock movements between picks. Producers also need to manage your livestock and property in line with those 7 LPA on-farm standards that we talked about before, to maintain thorough records as evidence of livestock history and on-farm practices, and be prepared to undergo an audit if requested. LPA is an audited accreditation, so as a livestock producer you do agree to complete an audit when asked, and this helps provide assurance and accountability from paddock to plate. So from an NLIS point of view, as a producer, you need to do a couple of things as well to make sure that you stand by what you sell, and everybody needs to play their part. So you need to keep your online NLIS account details up to date, and you can do that through the NLIS database. You need to order and use NLIS tags as identifiers for every animal on your pick. The required tag type differs a bit between states and territories, but every animal must be tagged with an accredited NLIS device and can't be moved to another pick without one, including to another farm, feedlot, sale yard or processor. And in Tasmania, this means ordering your NLIS devices through an agent or online. Livestock transfers between picks must be recorded by transferring the tags in the NLIS database, and the person receiving the livestock is responsible for completing the transfer. All producers need to regularly check their own records against the database regularly to ensure that transfers have been completed, and this is particularly important if you are relying on someone else to make the transfer. You need to check that this has happened. And for Tasmania, property-to-property transfers must be complete within 7 days for cattle, and for sheep and goats there is no transfer requirement, but the weigh bill or the national vendor deck must be kept on hand for 7 years. It is recommended that you do a pick reconciliation every year to ensure that the NLIS database is an accurate record of NLIS devices and livestock on your property. And to ensure lifetime livestock traceability, the NLIS database from time to time issues automated emails when differences or discrepancies occur, and it's important that you investigate those differences if you are notified of them. And producers need to remember that completing livestock transfers on the NLIS database is also an auditable requirement of LPA, and auditors will review NVDs, ENVDs and NLIS transfers as part of any audit. And I think that some of these things that we're talking about now from an NLIS and an LPA, what you need to do to meet your requirements, became really quite prominent during the bushfire season in particular that we went through earlier this year. So it's really important that you try and keep those records as up to date as you possibly can, so that in the instance of something happening, you can easily go and check, or you're already familiar with the system, so you're not having to learn in a fairly stressful situation as well. So a couple of integrity insights at this point around checking the database, checking transfers, doing your pick reconciliations. There's a number of tech tips that are currently available on the NLIS database. So if you do need help navigating the database, we've got a series of those available, and also stay tuned for a number of how-to new tech tips that are coming very soon. And just there, just to note, to check the NLIS database whenever transfers have been completed to ensure that the numbers are correct, and it can save you a lot of time rather than correcting mistakes later down the track. So LPA, excuse me, LPA NVDs, as I mentioned before, they certainly bring together all the on-farm assurance, identification and traceability details. And the NVD really is, I guess it's the most visible part of the integrity system. It's certainly the part that everybody's most familiar with because it's something that you're filling out most regularly, and it is absolutely the basis for ensuring a safe and traceable food product. So LPA NVDs, either the paper-based or the electronic version, bring together all that on-farm assurance, identification and traceability. You can stand by what you sell by ensuring that every NVD you complete is clear, correct and complete, or simply use the ENVD for a faster and easier way to manage your consignments. NVDs are a legal document and they are your declaration that you have met the requirements of the LPA program. This declaration is married to the livestock's lifetime traceability when the transfer is then completed on the database. And assurance and traceability need to go hand in hand so our customers can remain confident in our integrity system. That's why NLIS transfers are part of LPA audits. Consumer confidence in the system relies on assurance and traceability being linked. So make sure you complete your NVDs properly and make sure that your transfer on the NLIS is done, referencing the LPA NVD number and making sure that you can then do your part to keep the system strong. So, as I said, we're here tonight to give you some, I guess, some tips. And the biggest tip that we can give you in order to enable you, regardless of the role that you might play in the red meat industry, whether it's a producer or an advisor or other service provider, is that we all want to stand by what you sell, and the biggest way that we can do that is to fill in every LPA NVD correctly. So the aim is to make sure that every NVD is filled out so that it's clear, correct and complete. Now, there are lots of tips on the guide in the LPA NVD book. So if you're purchasing and using hard copy NVDs, there's heaps of tips in there on how to fill it out. But tonight we're just going to focus on some of the key areas where sometimes there is an element of confusion. So part A of the NVD, that's quite often where producers need a bit of a hand. These questions are essentially about the animal's history. Now this information is crucial for food safety and market access. So the key here is to stay on the safe side, and if in doubt, tick yes. So an increasing number of markets will not accept beef or beef products that are treated with hormonal growth promoters or HGPs. So answering this question on the NVD correctly is vital to protecting Australia's access to these markets. So again, if in doubt, ticks yes on the cattle NVD when it says you must declare if cattle have ever been treated with HGPs in their lifetime. And remember, no cattle for the EU market can be treated with HGPs. And in terms of a quick integrity insight there from an LPA learning point of view, don't forget that cattle treated with HGPs must be identified by a triangular ear punch. So that's an easy way to identify if an animal that you've purchased in, for example, has been treated with HGPs. The second question here is on the sheep NVD. So have all the sheep or lambs in this consignment been treated with a scabby mouth vaccination, either at marking or at least 14 days prior to their presentation for sale? So make sure that you check your records in terms of scabby mouth vaccination. As an insider, a quick tip for you, it's always good to align your record keeping to the 7 LPA standards. And to do that, we've made it a little bit easier for you. You can download a number of free templates from the ISC's website. You can simply search for the LPA record keeping templates, and there's a number of templates there or checklists to help you keep your records for each of those different 7 requirements. So the next question that we might focus on is, has the owner stated above owned these cattle since their birth? Now, you would not believe the number of NVDs that we see where we'll get probably 3 to 4 of these boxes all ticked on the one NVD. For how long you've owned the livestock, if you've bred them, tick yes. If you have bought them, go with the most recent date of purchase in the whole consignment. You can't tick all 4 boxes if you've got a mixed consignment. So tick the most recent one that applies to the whole consignment. Similarly, with chemical or veterinary treatments, with holding periods and feed, it's really important that you declare the risk. For all questions, tick yes or no, not both. And again, check your records. So if you can't be certain of the vaccination status, treatment with holding periods, or what they've been fed, play it safe, declare the risk, and tick yes. Similarly, check your records to see that all animals have not been fed restricted animal material products. These include animal products such as meat and offal, animal fats, blood, meat, bone, or blood meals. And again, do not send livestock to slaughter if they are within withholding periods or export slaughter intervals. And you can go to the APVMA website for information on export slaughter intervals. Again, here's just some examples of those questions. In the past 6 months, have any of these animals been on a property listed within or placed under restrictions because of chemical residues, or are there any animals within a consignment still within a withholding period or an export slaughter interval? So again, checking your records, and if in doubt, check yes. And question 7 there, in the past 60 days, have any of cattle off the cattle NVD in this consignment consumed any material that was still within a withholding period when harvested, collected or grazed? And then finally, the last part to part A is really the declaration. So this is your declaration and guarantee that you've met all the LPA requirements, that the NVD is complete and correct, and that the animals have not had access to any restricted animal material. Don't forget that LPA NVDs are a legal document and are part of your LPA record keeping, so it can be audited. And then part B, that's the part to be completed by the livestock carrier. So don't let the truckie leave without filling in this section, or it'll be missing from your copy and your records will therefore be incomplete. And quite often we'll have some questions around mixed consignments. So basically the tip here is, if you can divide them into groups based on their history, then you can do more than one NVD, as long as you can identify and separate those animals. But if you've got a mixed consignment that can be divided, then yes, you should be doing separate NVDs. So now, just for the remainder of the session, I guess it's just some really practical tips to help you with meeting all those different integrity requirements, because we certainly understand that it's a fairly complex system. I don't think it's complicated. I think once we all get our head around it and we understand those requirements, and if we're referring to the resources and the materials that we have available, it certainly is complex, but hopefully it's quite easy to do and not complicated. And I mean, with all that in mind, it is a fairly we are part of a large industry that enjoys access all around the world, so it is really important that I guess we are taking it seriously, but that the system itself can actually demonstrate what our customers need. So in terms of tips for filling out the NVDs on the go, fill out as much as you can before you get to the yard, so that you've not got the dog with the muddy paws stepping all over it and you don't know what your animal counts are and all the likes of it. Try and be as prepared as you possibly can. Don't get caught short. Order your new book early or start using the eNVD. Keep your LPA records up to date, so the information that you need to enter on your NVD is there and you already have that information to hand. Make sure that you file your NVD. Keep your copy of the NVD as part of your record keeping, because remember, it certainly can be something that's audited. And check the NLIS database to ensure that transfers have occurred. So in 48 hours after you've just the animals are gone, then just check in with the NLIS database to make sure that they've all been moved off the system. So now you would have heard us talk a couple of times tonight about the eNVD. So the NVD is available in both a hard copy or also the eNVD, and I'd certainly encourage you to get on and start using the eNVD. It's more accurate than the paper version. It reduces time and duplication spent completing livestock assurance and health declarations, because you've only got to populate a form once and then it will automatically fill in those sections in the other form. So rather than doing your NVD and your animal health statement and your MSA declaration, you can simply tick those different forms that you would like, fill out the information once, and it will start to populate that information for you. The ENVD system is available to LPA accredited producers, feedlots and value chain stakeholders. As I said, it's faster, easier and more accurate. It ensures that the latest versions of the NVD are always being used and that they meet those market requirements. It reduces time and duplication. It reduces the cost of storing and retrieving historical consignments for auditing purposes and admin purposes if you need them. And you don't need to wait for new NVD books to arrive. And the other thing is that stakeholders in the supply chain can log in and can view consignments, including those that are receiving animals. So the ENVD is not just an NVD, it's a system for completing all your consignment paperwork digitally, including livestock assurance and health declarations. And you access the new ENVD system by logging in using your LPA credentials, so your LPA user ID and password and your PIC, and you can start creating consignments through the LPA service centre. So why is the new ENVD version better? Well, the first version of the ENVD was released in 2017, and following an extensive consultation process by ISC with stakeholders along the value chain, we were now able to launch the new ENVD at the end of March this year. It underwent some very rigorous testing, including by a number of producers and the feedlot sector. You can print it at any time, even when the form is incomplete, and then you can complete it in hard copy or in writing. There's unlimited space for livestock descriptions now. You can draw your signature or brand using a touchscreen device or a mouse such as your finger. So unlike previous versions where you had to upload electronic signatures, which was quite clunky. And there's a number of new features and enhancements which are routinely being released in response to feedback that we're receiving at the moment. So it's constantly being updated. And the best way, I guess, as I just said, there's a number of ongoing ENVD system updates, and that's happening all the time. The system the system update information is all available on the ISC website, and you can just search for ENVD system updates. Some of the updates that we've already put in place since the system was released are you can now have a mixed sex option for sheep, lamb and goat consignments. We've removed the save button from the transporter step in the consignment. The look and feel of the movement information page has been updated, and a number of performance issues, including screen errors, have also been fixed. And what's coming up next, there'll be a cow and calf sex option within consignments, the ability to delete submitted consignments, and a number of bugs fixes. And I guess the tip there is that ISC continuously updates the ENVD to ensure it meets expectations and requirements. Updates are on the website, as we mentioned, and you can we welcome feedback, because we know the system needs to evolve and needs to meet all our stakeholder needs. So you're welcome to send in your feedback about your experience at any time. So that was a couple of, I guess, integrity insights or some practical tips around completing the NVD and touching on the ENVD. Let's have a quick look at some tips for record keeping so that you've got that information that you need when it comes to being audited or when it comes to completing your NVD. And I guess the important thing to note is that there is no perfect formula for record keeping. It's very much a personal thing. It depends on your system. It depends on the size of your business. It depends whether or not you're quite happy to keep paper records or to work within an Excel spreadsheet, or whether you wanted to go with a decision support tool, of which there are many in the Australia agriculture sector. But here's just a couple of some ideas that might make your life a little bit easier. But when ordering chemicals or vet supplies, ask your supplier to add the batch number and the expiry date for each product to the invoice, so you can refer back to that as your livestock treatment records as part of LPA. Use your phone. We've all got smartphones now. We're all backyard journalists or reporters. Every time you take a photo on your phone, it's date stamped. And certainly if you're an iPhone user, you can use your photos, you can add it to notes. Something that I quite often do is if I'm if I'm drenching a mob of sheep here on my property, for example, I'll make sure that I've got the drum of drench. I'll turn it around so that I've got the batch number, I've got the sheep in the yards in the background, I can see their coloured tags, so I know which mob they are and I know what year group they are. For example, take a photo and I've got all that date stamped, and then I can just punch it up to a notes function. I'm not a big producer, so I don't necessarily need big decision support tools and app technology. And then simply that does meet your requirements for record keeping. And as I said, it's all date stamped. You've got a photograph there, so not only do you know that the date that you treated the animals, you know which animals you treated, and you also know the chemical, and you've also met your chemical treatment requirements as well. Another one there, when purchasing fodder, hay or grain, download a copy of the commodity vendor declaration and ask the supplier to fill it in. CVDs only cover food safety requirements, such as the application of chemical to the crop, so most farmers are happy to provide that information, and this again will ensure that you have the paperwork that you need if you're ever audited. A couple of tips there when you're buying in fodder, and certainly this again has been very front of mind for people, particularly following bushfires and drought, is if you are purchasing in feed and things like that, so that you can keep an eye on weed incursion from a biosecurity point of view, because we haven't talked much about biosecurity tonight, but again, that's a really important component to LPA, but making sure where you're actually feeding these commodities, so it's hay, pellets, all that sort of thing that you're bringing in, make sure you're keeping track of where you're feeding them, so then you can manage weed incursions going down the track. But you won't necessarily get that information from a commodity vendor deck, because as it says there, it's really around food safety and residues. So some tips for audits. So what's involved in an LPA audit? I guess the first thing is don't panic, that audits are about identifying areas for practical on-farm improvement, and that your LPA records will be reviewed by an auditor, so it's important to make sure that they're accurate and up to date. And the auditor will also give you tips as part of the process if there are things that need to be improved. But there's a couple of things here, and we could certainly do a whole webinar on preparing and surviving LPA audits. But I mean, a good one to know is, did you know that as part of your LPA accreditation now, that you need to keep a copy of the Australian Animal Welfare Standards and Guidelines on hand if you are audited? So you can download it. Doesn't mean that you need to have it printed and in your bookshelf. You just need to download it or bookmark it on your web browser and save it so that all of your team members can access it and should be familiar with it. So there's a couple of practical tips there as well. In terms of more information and where you can go, I mean, it's a fairly busy place at the moment. As I said, the integrity system it's quite complex as we try and meet the needs of our customers all around the world, but we have, particularly in the last 12 months, really developed a number of resources available in various formats. We do have a lot of information online. We've got the Integrity Systems Company website, so integritysystems.com.au. We have a regular email called Integrity Matters that goes out once a month that all LPA accredited producers that have shared their email with us would receive. So that goes out monthly as well. If you don't receive that and you would like to, then certainly just reach out. We've got the standard social and digital channels, so YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. However, we do have a number of hard copy resources. Recognise that people still, a lot of producers prefer the hard copy NVD book, so there's information in there. And if you do catch us at events and the like, you will see us with hard copy brochures and things like that. And there's a couple of big projects that we're working on at the moment where we hope to get more hard copy materials visible for producers through rural retailers, livestock selling centres and sale yards, and with agents and transporters and the like as well. And again, we'll also be sending you an email first thing tomorrow morning with a number of links to more information. And ISC also has a heap of tools and resources. And as I said, we regularly send out emails as well. So some of the tools and resources that are available, we've got a number of integrity videos. So we just touched on how to complete the NVDs. We've got a great new animation that goes with the new NVDs that you might want to check out. If you're interested in starting to use the eNVD, there's an animation for how you can get on board that platform. There's a number of how-to animations. There's the LPA learning. There's FAQs throughout our website, fact sheets, particularly around in response to natural disasters and still being able to meet your integrity system requirements following natural disasters. There's record keeping templates that I mentioned earlier, and then you always can contact the help desk by email, or you can reach out and they can help you with your LPA and NLIS requirements as well. And then finally, before we break for some questions and discussion, I guess the one thing that I would really encourage you all to do is to sign up to MyMLA. So you can certainly make your life a lot easier from an integrity point of view, but also getting some customised information to sign up to MLA, and that brings all your integrity accounts into one place using the one password. So I don't know about anybody on the call, but certainly I used to find it really quite difficult when I had to log into NLIS and LPA and other platforms, all with different user IDs and different passwords. You can now link all that information. So set up your MyMLA, you'll get a personalised dashboard of information that's unique to you, and more importantly, you can have this single sign-on facility, which means that you've only got to remember one user ID and one password to link all your integrity accounts. So that would be livestock production assurance, NLIS, livestock data link if you're getting data out of that program, MSA and the like. And you'll also get all that through a customised dashboard. So you'll get local weather forecasts, prices and markets that are relevant to you, events, industry news and information, and links through to research resources that are of interest to you as well. So that's basically it from me and the talking. Now I'm more than happy to take some questions or to have a bit of a discussion. But just to point out there that we've got the Integrity Systems Company website, and we've got an email address you're more than welcome to contact, or you can reach out to us through the help desk as well. So I'll hand back to you now, Dee.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Virtual round of applause. A lot of information in a short space of time, in a nutshell there. So I would just encourage everyone to pop their questions in the Q&A. If you asked a question in the registration sign-up procedure, then please pop it in there as well. We just want to make sure that you're online, so we answer them for you. We do have one question in there already. So it says, I buy day-old calves from a dairy. Do I need to do anything, retransfer to my property?
So Damon, I might throw this one to you if that's okay, but my understanding is that absolutely that would be no different to any other requirement. And Andrea, please, if there are Tasmanian requirements that might be unique, then absolutely chirp in. But Damo, it still would require a livestock transfer and an NVD.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously Tasmania is a little bit different, and Andrew, happy for you to jump in. But if they are specifically going to slaughter, then they are exempt. However, and using certainly bobby calf tag. However, it does require certainly a movement to on farm. But certainly, Andrew, you can outline the process if there's anything that we've missed.
Andrea, are you able to unmute yourself? Perfect. Yeah. Over to you.
Yeah, with the bobby calves, yeah, they do require the visual tag and a bobby calf fender deck for any movement.
Okay, excellent. Thank you kindly. Now, next question from Angelina. How do we delete an NVD form that was put in and not actioned?
Yeah, I can reach out. So if that's specific to the EMVD platform per se, the current function now will give you the ability to certainly delete that. So if you jump into the new EMVD software and it might be privy to jump back in, create a new consignment, and when you do log back in, we'll have a list of your consignments available. There should be an action list there, drop-down box, which will give you the ability to delete that. So if you certainly are having troubles, reach out and we can certainly assist you for that as well. But there has got that functionality built in.
Excellent. Thanks, Damon. Another question from Angelina. How do we remedy NLIS forms that were never completed at the abattoir and still show animals no longer on our property? Do you need some more information on that one?
I'm just reading at the moment. How do we remedy NLIS forms that never completed? So I'm assuming that the forms were. The question probably is it the NVD form?
NVD form, I'd say.
Yeah, so
right.
I'd say obviously the processors would require a complete NVD form for one. So generally they would reject those animals if it isn't completed. But it's, I think, good practice to identify and know which animals or how many animals, be it mob-based or individual for cattle, have moved off your property, and obviously make sure that you know that by doing a query on your pick through the NLIS database, that you know that 50 head have been sent to the certainly to the abattoir, and 50 head have been moved off as well. So I think it's just around that double checking that the animals have been moved off, and I suppose it's around identifying and saying, well, I know I sent 50 and 49, or there might be a discrepancy in those numbers, and it's around asking the question as to why.
Thanks, Damon.
It's always a challenge.
Thank you. Angelina, if you have any further queries on that one, just pop back into the Q&A and we'll answer those. Another one from Chris Badco. So how do truck drivers sign the ENVD?
Yeah. You want to go, Kathleen, or I'm happy to?
Oh, I can do this one if you like. So there's a couple of different ways that truck drivers can sign the new ENVD. So as I said very briefly in the presentation, you can do it using a mouse or using your finger on a mobile device, and that would essentially involve handing your mobile device to the truck driver, for example, and he could then do that with his finger. Or you can also print the NVD and then he could just sign it with a pen as normal. But yeah, there's two different ways that you can do it. The previous version, you had to upload an electronic signature, which meant you had to get him to do it on a piece of paper and then scan it in and things. Now that's been removed, so you can do it either on a laptop or a PC with a mouse, or with a finger as a touch screen, or print it off and then you can sign it like they've always done. Anything further, Damo?
Yeah, and I think the where we're obviously trying to continually to improve the product is, if you are using your phone and your truckie, and he's the normal truckie, and I'm certainly talking from my experience here, but we use a similar transport, or if it is yourself transporting it, you can actually save that template down, and save that transporter within that template. So if you know you are turning off lambs again in a month's time, or in 2 weeks' time, you can regenerate or repopulate that NVD and save that transporter down. You might have a multitude of transporters that you can save to make it easier and quicker to complete. So that's just an added improvement that we're working on currently. Thanks,
Damon. Just keep your questions coming if you've got any more. We do have the brains of the ISC Trust here at the moment, so feel free to pick their brains while you're online. We've still got a few minutes to go. I will perhaps just delve into one of the questions that was asked before. Hobby farmers, how big of a farmer do you need to be for this to apply to you?
In terms of the integrity system in its entirety, Dee? I mean, if you are the producer of livestock or the carer of livestock, which can be sheep, cattle, goats, doesn't matter if they have a name, or that they're loved, if they're being transferred from one pick to another pick, then you are a livestock producer and you are part of the red meat food chain. So therefore those animals would need to have a tag. Those animals, if they are moved at some point over their life from one property to another, or to a sale yard or to a processing plant, then you are part of the integrity system, or you are part of the red meat industry, and you need to comply with requirements of the integrity system.
Excellent, thank you. Now back online. So if the ENVD is printed and signed by the truck driver, does it have to be scanned and somehow submitted electronically at a later date?
One for Damon.
Yeah, and this is the challenge we've got currently. So I think it's around making the decision that when you're completing that consignment. So I think the key point here is, as we transition from EDEC across to ENVD, we wanted to keep the flexibility in the product. So we wanted to give you the ability to complete as much as the form as you can, or complete as less as the form as you'd like. So now at the moment, if you're completing the form with a preset template and the truckie has signed it, and you've got him preset, then and you know exactly the number of head, then you can pre-fill that for them. And obviously you're going to still have to print out 3 copies like you would currently through the EDEC or ENVD system. And then you would present that hard copy. So at the moment, you can email those PDFs to the abattoirs. You can obviously provide that in a soft copy version. By that I mean as an email for the transporter. However, it's around making sure that the destination, be it the processing plant or the likes, is accepting those. But I'd say in the current form, I would print those like you have at the moment, where they have been pre-filled. Make sure they're true and correct, and provide them as a hard copy. So realistically, we're improving the information that's input into it. It's giving you the flexibility to be able to fill in that form or change it. And then as we progress, yes, the electronic version will be automated through to key supply chain partners. So that's the journey we'll be going on, but this is probably the first step in that journey.
Thank you, Damon. I'll just put out a final call for any last questions, or we've got a couple of minutes to go. And just while we're waiting, we just do want to get your feedback on this webinar session. We'd love to know if it's a format that suits you to get information about Integrity System and the work of the Integrity Systems company. And particularly if there's any other topics that you would be interested in. We'd love to know if there's other things that we could be delivering information to you. So we're just going to pop a survey link in the Q&A. So hopefully people can see that down the bottom of the screen. If you just click in there and click on that little link, and we'd love to get any feedback from you. So if there's no more questions, I might just have a final whip round. Kathleen, do you have any closing remarks?
No, other than to say thank you very much, everyone, for getting online. This is new for Integrity Systems Company, and in fact, Tasmania is our first state to have our Integrity Systems webinar, and as part of the Stand By What You Sell program. So thank you very much for being part of it. And as Dee said, please provide us with any feedback if there's other topics that you would like to hear about, or if there's things that I touched on tonight that you would like more information on. So a demo and a deep dive into the ENVD, or something around audits, for example, or how to do NLIS transfers and things like that. Absolutely. I mean, we've all got very used to the online platform and webinars over the last couple of months. And if this is a platform that works for you, more than happy to provide that information, because at the end of the day, it's all about making your lives easier, but so that we can all play our bit in standing by what you sell. But thank you all very much. Thank you to the ISC team. Thank you to Andrea, and big shout out to Ag Communicators. But yeah, that's it from me. Thanks, Dee.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. There you go. Your history makers, being in the first session that ISC has run. So please, we love your feedback. Just click on that link. But yeah, other than that, just thank you all for your attendance, and have a good evening. We'll just leave that chat open for another minute, just so people can grab that link. But thank you for your attendance, and good night.